Welcome back to another episode of Palisade Radio. This is your host, Colin Cattell. Returning guest on the program, we haven't had him on for about 2 years now. Florian Siegfried, he's the portfolio manager of the Precious Capital Global Mining and Metals Fund, which manages about $50 million 100% in the resource space. Florian, we were joking before the show, or commenting, I should say, that the last time we had you on kind of marked the inception of the bull market. Great timing, but now it's kind of been like a year and a half since we've had any positive movement as a broad market for mining. So a good point to start on would be where you think we're at in the cycle.
So thanks a lot first, Colin, for having me back on your show. I think 2 years ago we were chatting about the bottoming process of the metals and of the mining stocks. And then after January of 16, we got this huge run up to about August, September of 16. And since then, we have really been more trading sideways, or the market even lost, some percentage points. And I think that's absolutely normal, because we have seen gains of 100, 200% within 6-7 months. So who is not willing to take some chips off the table after such a nice profit, and probably wait for the other, for the next leg up in the market? And I think this is where we are. We have seen a tremendous rally in the overall equity markets. We have seen a relatively weak dollar price, which continues to be weak. And in this context, gold has been rising, but it has been frustrating for some investors that the disconnect between the mining shares and the gold price has been really widening as of late, and continues to do so. But I would say the gap will close sooner or later. It's just what the market is missing now is basically liquidity. There is a lack of liquidity. There is not a lot of new money coming into the sector. We rather see a rotation between existing investors getting out of one stock, taking the proceeds and buying another stock. And what we actually would need to see is fresh money coming in, and that would trigger the next leg up, and probably, of course, also a higher gold price. So it's some sort of a boring environment, but it's an attractive timing if you're not invested in the sector to think about to enter some positions in the stocks.
Now, Florian, in my show notes here, I have a note about the bifurcation of stocks, and you've had some strong performers during this boring time in the mining sector. Of course, during any market, no matter what sector you're in, there's always going to be those stocks that defy the odds. So what are you seeing in terms of what kind of companies are going up while everything else is even or down?
Yeah, I think last year was really not just in the mining stocks, but probably in the equity markets overall. This market was driven by momentum stocks. So momentum was really the theme, and I feel also that was the case in the mining stocks. And what has supported the momentum was really like the producers with strong free cash flow generation. Producers that declared dividends, that had some good discoveries, which pointed to an existing increase of mine life and so forth. So these were clearly the outperformers of last year. And most of the companies which were still stuck into a reinvestment cycle, which had a major capital program to be worked off in mine development, and actually did not generate cash, but they used cash to build the business, they have been out of favor. And so this is the discrepancy now, where I think it's time to revisit the situation, because you can find good value in some of the mid-cap producers First of all, there was a lack of news flow last year as they were building the mines. That was boring for investors. Then there was a huge impact on the GXDJ rebalancing in April of 2017, and some of these stocks really did not recover until the end of the year. Worse, we had tax loss selling in November, December, and that pressed the multiples to a historical low level in some cases, which I found, it's worthwhile to have a look now. And right now I see, some of the stocks are starting to move up against a weaker market. Not everyone, but some of them they do. They're up 10, 20%. And it's all driven basically by news flow. After being able to show some progress on the operational front, on the exploration front, I think people start to reconsider these stories and say, okay, what do I pay as a price? What is the value? And I think they are getting a little bit more attention right now than the rest.
Well, looking at the macro trends that might play into kickstarting this gold equity market back into play, a couple things that somebody like yourself would certainly be focusing on is the US dollar weakness. I'd say a clear trend has been defined now for the past year that the dollar is on the down and no longer on the up. And then what about the Dow, which has started to exhibit some volatility? It's recovered most of those losses from a couple weeks back. But that certainly is interesting as well.
Yeah, so we had a major hit in the Dow in early February, which took most people by surprise. Usually the stock market is always a good indicator of the economy and not the other way around. This is how I see it. And the question is, did we hit an all-time high, and are we going to roll over from here? What has been interesting is the weak dollar has not been supportive of the equity markets as it was like in 2016, where the dollar index lost about almost 10%, which is really significant. And that helped, of course, the equity markets in the US to move from one record to another. But now that doesn't work anymore. And I feel that, what is coming up is really the whole fiscal and interest rate environment, which is showing some significant shifts, especially in the rising rates of the 10-year T-bond, of the Libor rates. All those things, for me, they seem to, as they are going to reverse. So we probably have a situation where the bond market is no longer supportive of the equity markets, and all the, let's call it the conservative money, which was used to be in bonds for the last 30 years, where there was only one direction, is probably going to look for a new safe home, and that home could probably be gold as well.
Florian, last time we spoke, I believe we talked about a few stocks. And of course, that was good timing with it being January 2016 before the rally. One of them I believe we brought up would have been Perseus Mining. Is that the case?
Yeah, we talked about Perseus. Unfortunately, the stock did not do very well over the last 2 years. It has more been like a company, trading sideways. There were some issues in West Africa. And right now, this is basically something you want to reconsider at those levels, are about 40 Aussie cents, because I think that Perseus is like the classical example. They went through quite an aggressive M&A strategy over the last 2 years. They have actually built their second mine, Sissingué, in West Africa, which is ahead of schedule, should move into commercial production very soon. And then they have actually acquired 2 years ago a major asset in the Ivory Coast called Yaouré, where they spent significant amount of money for, moving the project more towards feasibility. A lot of drilling, metallurgy work needs to be done. So the company now has, a production profile which is quite different compared to 2 years ago. But as Edikan, their operating mine, has been, struggling for quite some time in Ghana, the company was just not able to generate cash. But, it seems like those issues are being resolved or should be resolved. And I think, for a market cap of about 400 million Australian dollars, a company that has a growth profile which could, more or less double the production in the next 3-4 years, it's worthwhile to reconsider.
Yeah, and I certainly didn't mean to bring up a stock we had discussed. It hasn't performed. I just find Perseus to be an interesting case. Over the last 2 years, it has held in well when considering the whole picture. But that was a stock that I really thought at the time was going to be a high flyer, and it didn't. And it just goes to show, not always the companies you would expect to move first are the ones that move first.
Yeah, and I think that was exactly the case with Perseus, because the market was just awaiting quarter by quarter if the turnaround takes place. It obviously took longer than expected. But we all know, mining operations are a tough business. Nothing goes easy, nothing goes straightforward. And basically, this is where the market has lost patience, I would say. But now I think, the stock really looks cheap to me. I have it into my top 10 holdings. And I feel there is much more upside than downside from here.
To put you on the spot a bit, what would you say your top 1 or 2 mining picks are right now in context to this market?
I have started to overweight OceanaGold, which has also been a laggard last year. They had issues in the US with the commissioning of the commercial production of their Hale mine in South Carolina. The stock underperformed. There were issues in the Philippines. There have been some other issues with the Waihi deposit in New Zealand. There were all sorts of things that the market didn't like, but the company, I think, is also like Perseus. They are more advanced. They invested significant capital in their portfolio. They will spend about $40 million in exploration this year. And I think this is a stock that, first of all, they pay a dividend. I would say has one of the best, when not the best, operating team. And is starting to re-rate hopefully this year. So at least the stock is up around 6% year to date against the market, which is down 10. So these are things I would consider like Oceana.
Great. Florian, I'm not sure if you take high net worth money or institutional money, and most of our listeners are, of course, Canadian or US, so not sure if you can help there. But if anybody wants to get in touch or is interested in providing capital into your fund, how would they do that?
You can go to the website www.lbswiss.ch. There is all the information on the fund there. I'm with fact sheets and so forth. You will also find my email and telephone number, and you can get in contact with me directly if you want.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you back on. I have a good feeling that this is going to mark another inception point for the bull market, hopefully kicking into gear for the second leg up. And hopefully we'll get you back on in the near future, not wait 2 years next time.
That would be great, Colin.
Excellent. Florian, thanks so much for coming back.
Thanks a lot.
Think you understand the junior mining sector and you think that the participants in the mining sector, junior mining sector, are good people and kind people, hit the bid.
How violent that term could be, it actually could be quite violent. It could be a rip your face off uranium rally.
And the world is always going to need raw materials. It's going to need copper and gold and nickel and so forth.
Totally destabilized. Hey, Troll, did you hear what's going on in Yemen?